Hello makers and welcome back to the studio. This week we're going to jump in on an old friend, which is some smeared paint. Now you may recall that several videos ago we did some controlled smearing. You can see the video up here. And what this allowed us to do was to really just take pieces of paper and quite literally spread paint on them as opposed to painting and give it a unique look and feel. We're going to do something very different today, however. I have a lot of paints. If we look in here, I have some watercolor paper that we're going to be building on, and I have a lot of my Craft Smart paint colors here, quite a few to choose from. I'm not necessarily going to use all of them, but if I need to, I have some to work with. And the concept is simply this. We're going to put the paint on this piece of paper, and then we're going to be using a squeegee. Now I have two here. I have a smaller squeegee, and I have a larger squeegee. These are used predominantly for screen printing. And by the way, there'll be a link down in the description below for all of the materials we'll be using for this project. But this just allows you to have kind of a nice tight connection between, in this case, our paper and our paint. And I'm going to show you how this is going to work to our advantage, okay? But the first thing I need to think about is, what is the end product going to look like? Now, the truth of the matter is if I come in here and just start smearing paint on this paper, it's going to be all over the place. If that's what I want, then yeah, why not go for it? But in truth, I'm planning ahead a little bit here. And what I'd like to be able to do instead is have kind of some parameters of where the paint goes and where the paint doesn't. In essence, I'd like to build up some sort of a boundary and create margins, if you will, on my paper. So I can say, you know what, the paint can be smeared from here down to, let's say, here. So we'll put it in the kind of the square area and we'll leave some white on the edges. Well, how am I going to do that if I'm just going to be smearing paint down my paper? And the answer is that we're going to have to mask this off in some way. Now, by the way, we're going to be using some tools and tricks that I shared with this video on how we can mask paper. And I'm going to show you an additional step in what we can do with this today to make things even easier for ourselves. So my first thought when I look at this paper here is, how can I think about kind of the parameters of where I want my actual color to show up? And I'm thinking, it could be maybe an arc here. I could do that. I'm going to just go and make it simple and kind of say, okay, a rectangle starting here down to, say, here. We'll leave a little bit more of the white margin at the bottom of this piece here. So to do that, I'm going to use my favorite paper masking tape, which is Scotch brand magic tape. So if you've seen the previous video, this will not come as a surprise to you. For those of you who have not really thought about it, Scotch magic tape is really the only tape I found that works when you want to mask any kind of paper, especially paper that has a relatively rough surface. Right? It does a couple things. First of all, it allows you to fill in the nooks and crannies nicely, which is a plus. Also, it doesn't tear the paper when you're trying to take it off. And the thing about putting paint on paper is it's going to soften the paper in places. And then if you have tape on top of that, it ends up lifting the paper and ruining your project, which nobody wants to do, right? Because crying into your hands after working for many hours on a project is just not what you want to be doing. So let's talk a little bit about what we want to do from a boundary standpoint here. And I'm going to show you also a way that we can make this go a little bit easier for us. Now, I will mention that one of the challenges with using the Scotch tape is that you can't see it very well once you put it down. Now, I have ordered some colored adhesive tape, and I'm going to try that in a future video to see if that will make it easier for the kind of thing that we're trying to do here. But for right now, let's come on in here and let's kind of set some parameters. I'll move my paints over to the edge here a little bit, give myself some room to work with. And I'm going to say, let's just start by kind of defining where the upper range of our art is going to be. And I'm just going to drag a line across here. Okay. I'm going to try to be as accurate as I can, but I'm not going to go crazy here, to be honest, because at the end of the day, we're going to be smearing paint on this paper. It's not like it's going to be, measured to the millimeter as to whether or not this will work for us. I'm going to do the same thing down here at the bottom, and I'm going to just say, let's say we kind of run from here to here, and that looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Again, if I wanted to get a ruler out here and kind of get a sense of how level things were, I could do that. So I have an upper line, I have a lower line. I know they're hard to see for you right now since it is relatively transparent. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do the same thing on the sides. Let me just create something here that will allow me to bring this in. And let's say we have about, I'm eyeballing it here, but I'm saying about 2 to 3 inches. And by the way, I can grab one of my my quilting rulers, my transparent rulers, and I can get a much more accurate sense of where that is. It's about 2.5. And I'm going to try to do the same thing roughly on the other side here, just so I have some symmetry between the sides here. And again, I'm trying to get a sense of how far that is. Let me get a length off of here. And let's see if we can get something that's roughly the same. And by the way, one of the things that we can do in the future if we want to, if we do this and it just seems like one side is a little bit lopsided than the other, there's nothing to prevent us from actually trimming the paper and shoring things up. So just something to keep in mind. This paper doesn't have to necessarily be this size to do what we need to do. How are we doing here? I'm just getting under the light. This side's going to be a little bit wider. I'm going to just do myself a favor right now, and I'm just going to bring the margins in just a wee bit so I don't have to fix anything else in the future. And let's bring that like that. I think that's pretty good. All right. Now when I look at them, yeah, closer. Again, we're not going to be sweating this. All right. So the concept now is I have a boundary in which I don't want my paper to come out of, but I'm going to be smearing paper from up here. Paint, I should say. I'm going to be putting paint on this and smearing it from top to bottom. And of course, my tape lines will help, but this is still exposed paper on all sides. So how's that going to work for us? Well, we're going to use another trick to make that happen. Now, I could just keep grabbing my tape and say, let's put some more tape down. And I've done that in the past. And sometimes you end up with a little gap between the tape lines and the paint gets in there. And then you got to deal with that. Instead, I'm going to go to a couple sheets of printer paper, of copier paper. And I'm going to use that to mask down here. All right, so I want to be able to make sure that this gets masked down. So let me grab my tape here, and I'm just going to run a line here. Let me trim the tape off, and I am going to drop it down here. And again, the goal here is to get the paper and this tape stuck down behind my original line here. So now I have an area that if I pull the paint down onto it, it's not going to get on the paper underneath it. And I'll be able to pull that up. Let me do the same thing over here. I'm just going to bring this over here and create some masking over on that side. And again, let's make sure we have that and try to get it down as tight as possible. And again, you are dealing with white on white. Sometimes you might need to get your head down in there a little bit closer. Make sure everything's covered the way you want it to be covered. I'm going to put some tape on this seam here just to make things smoother. So now when I wipe my paint down here, it has a place to go where it's not going to get on the bottom of my artwork. Now to make this work also, I'm going to do the same thing on the sides. I have a fair amount of control here, but let me just come in here and quickly mask what's going on the sides. Like that. And let's get that right. And through the power of static electricity, there we go. Like a tractor beam, we sucked the paper up into there. I'll do the same thing on the other side here. Give myself some real estate to work with. Again, there's my original tape line. Let's tape this on top of that. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect. This is just going to be something that is just protecting the paper underneath. All right. Now, I'm going to be putting paint up here. I'm not as concerned about it crossing the boundaries up here at the top. I could certainly mask that off if I wanted to. But right now I want to get to actually creating this piece. And so, yeah, this is actually going to stay down because it's now taped to my cutting mat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to freestyle this. Again, this is an abstract art piece. It's not going to end up looking anything like what we started with, and I'll show you what that means in just a moment. But what it allows me to do is to place some paint within this framework here in the center, the things that are not taped off. And I'm going to put the paint down, and eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to smear all that paint away. And what's going to be left behind, well, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm going to shake my paints up just because a lot of times they end up sitting around for a while if they're not being used on a regular basis. And so the pigment has a tendency to sink to the bottom of the canisters and get a lot of inconsistencies. But let me come in here with this orange yellow color. And I'm going to put a drop of paint right there. I'm going to put a drop of paint right there. See how I'm doing this? And again, what we do with this is entirely up to us. There's no right answer. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to kind of just make a dot dispersion pattern. And this will be kind of a base color. I like how this is turning out already. And patience here, not a bad thing just to take your time. And again, as we've talked about in the past, when you're dealing with colors and material is listen to what they're trying to tell you. Your brain is constantly going to be offering you feedback about what it thinks looks good and what doesn't look good. Whether you think about it or not, you're always like, well, I could do a little bit better there. Or I can say, you know what, this color looks great. What color would really go well with this one here? You know what I have in here? I have, actually, I like this one. It's a plum color. So the Craft Smart Plum, I'm going to shake this guy up as well. And let's drop some plum in here. Do I want to do the same thing of putting dots down? I mean, I certainly could. It's not a hard thing to do. By the way, having some paper towels on hand while you're doing this is not a bad idea at all. Let me just grab mine. Again, if you get paint on your fingers, the last thing you want to do is transfer it to the paper. And that's a very real possibility. All right, I'm going to come back in here and let's drop some purple in here and get some kind of dots in between the dots, if you will. There we go. Nice. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. I'm going to put one up here in the upper corner. I think that'll be good too. And then down here, I'll put some stuff right in there, like that. Okay. Like how that's turning out. Again, this is very, very simple. And the question I'm really asking myself is what color should go in here next? You know what? I've got a kind of a teal blue. It's actually called Teal C. And let me get this guy shook up a little bit. Shaken. I'm all shaked up. And let's come in here. And I'm going to try something a little bit different here. I'm going to try to create a little bit of a line, if you will, like that. Okay, and let me do the same thing over here. Let me do the same thing right across here. Maybe a line down here. And a line down here. All right? Now, this isn't our final piece at all. This is kind of our way to get there. I'm going to drop some bright pink. I think some pink would really add to this, certainly make it pop even a little bit more. And I'm going to go back to my dots, I think, with the pink. And we'll get some in here. Pink. And just take your time. No hurry here. Yeah, obviously, when you're trying to build a 1 hour master, you want to stay within 1 hour, which we're going to do easily today on this project. But we'll have our masterpiece done. We'll get there. Whoops, let's add to that. It was a happy accident, right? That's what happens sometimes. You spill paint and nothing to say it didn't belong there to begin with. And I'm going to put another couple more right there, one there, and one down here. Okay. Now, again, sometimes one of the things you need to think about when you're working on any project is at what point do I cross that threshold of, yeah, I did too much. And I think we're getting pretty close to where we want to with the colors. Let's just think about if there's anything missing in here that might really help enhance this a little bit more. We're dealing with a lot of good colors in here. You know what I'm thinking, though? Let's get in here and, I'm going to drop some red in here as well. That'll help this out nicely. So let's get some holiday red. And let's get some red into the mix here. Get that upper corner. The thing that's fun about this is you're really just looking for places where you haven't already put paint and just dancing here between the raindrops, so to speak. Right, there's a lot of candy colors in here. We got candy colors going down right now. All right. And is there anything else? You know what? I'm thinking one last thing that I might do, and that's going to put it a darker blue here. I've got a peacock blue. So let's get just a lot. We're not going to overdo it because blue being a darker color can really dominate. So let's just get some right there. We get one down here. And since we already have this other blue in here, well, it's going to certainly affect what we see. Get some blue down here. One more over here. And I think there's one more over here. We'll put it right there. All right. So what I'm looking at now is really just kind of a paint dispersion pattern, right? I disperse this around, but now we're going to pull everything back together. All right, and now it's time for the magic. It's a little scary because again, this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, and this is where we can mess things up. I don't want you to think that way, however, because the truth of the matter is that we're here to make a happy accident either way. Now, what I want to do is I want to take my squeegee, and this one has really tight corners on it. It's got a 90-degree angle, which is going to make it really good to get behind that paint and pull it from top to bottom. And that's simply what I want to do. I want to come up to the top here, and I want to get on that paint line, let's say, and I want to draw my squeegee down. Now, again, the paint will start smearing, obviously. And what's going to start happening, you'll notice, is that where we've put the dots of color, that's actually going to be dominant in what we end up seeing as a result. The pattern, the dot pattern is going to be dominant. And we'll see how this turns out. It may be an amazing success or it may fall apart and be an experiment, but either way, we're going to learn something along the way. Now, because my squeegee is only so large, and by the way, you can use a squeegee from a shower. It doesn't have to be, a super specialized thing. A squeegee from a shower will work fine. But I want to be able to pull the paint down and get it into this paint area here so I can, again, remove it without getting it actually back on my artwork here. All right. So, all right, stop stalling, Spider. Let's do this. I'm going to come up here and I am going to get my squeegee in place and let's draw down. And get it right over the edge there. Okay. So that's one thing. Now, I'm going to wipe my squeegee so I don't end up transferring this paint because I will need to make another pass here. Actually, let me get another piece of paper towel just to make sure it's all good. Just to make sure we don't end up over painting or painting on something we don't want to paint on. And by the way, super important because you do have a lot of paint. You'll notice that paint on things is make sure that you're not just dropping this in your lap or on your floor. Anything else you might not want to have painted to the degree we're painting. So roll of paper towel is a good thing to have. All right, let me grab my squeegee. Again, it's time for a second pass. I'm going to come back here to the top and let's just do the same thing. I'm going to come on down. There we go. And again, I'm going to just wipe this off so I don't inadvertently get paint on things I don't want to get paint on, like myself. Another paper towel. Save the day here. Okay. So there we are. Now, again, I want to point out that the places where we had put some of the colors, right, become dominant. So where the dots actually sat, those are the things that are really popping out. But of course, as we brought the paint down the page, it really created this kind of fun pattern, right? Now, what's even more enjoyable, I think, is that while this is kind of cool, and I like how it's turned out, like I said, kind of candy colors here, it's when we take the masking off that we can really start to see kind of how this fits in the framework that we've created with our paper. So again, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it as cautiously as I can, let's say. Let's come up here to the top and I'll get rid of that. Just make a pile of debris here. And just a side piece, which didn't need, but turns out that's why we put it there. We didn't need it, and that's a good thing, but if we did need it, it would have been even better. It would have been in the right place. Okay. And this is going to be the real truth teller here going across the bottom. Again, take your time. Take your time. We don't want to risk ripping the paper at all. It's less risky with the magic tape, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. Whoops. Looks like I got to remember the order in which these tape lines went down. All right, so let's get this pull down the side. There we go. And again, I'm going to fold this over so that any of the, beautiful. And this is the last piece. Beautiful. Oh, see how that pops? You guys seeing that at all? Let me just grab this last piece of tape from across the top and get that on. And there we go. Very, very cool. Now, this is kind of fun. And again, it has a framing already built into it. I'm going to have to give this a little bit of time to dry, but I have an idea on how we can kind of come back into this and even enhance it a little bit further, if that's what we want to do. And by the way, not required. Not required. We may stop and say, that's exactly what I want to see. But I can also come back in here and I can really pop some of the colors a little bit more. So let's do that. Let's take a few minutes. I'm going to get this and let this dry a little bit. And then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how we might even enhance this type of thing a little bit further to get closer to what we really want to see. So come on back in a sec.
2 very boring minutes later.
All right, well, I've given this a few more minutes to dry, but in truth, because we spread the paint out so thinly, it didn't really take long at all. So this is a very dry piece. I'm looking at this and I like it. I really like how it turned out, and the fact that there's the interrelationship between the colors is pretty good. What I'm thinking here, and I don't know, it really looks almost like a big pile of candy to me. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be, but I thought maybe it'd be really fun to come and find a way to just pop these colors a little bit more, because there's nothing wrong with them, but they're a little subdued. They're really in the background here. So one of the possibilities is that I can come in here with my paint again, and I can find a way to use this and add some drops to my finished piece to really kind of pop different things. For example, I'm going to take this violet color and let me shake this up. And I'm going to use this, and now we're not planning on smearing anymore. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to kind of enhance different places. Like, for example, I'm going to put a dot right here on this section. And I want to be a little bit more careful here because I want to be able to have more controlled paint. And so I'm going to put a dot there. And maybe I'll put a dot over here as well. We'll create the combination of pink and purple. Nice. But as you can see, when we set these other colors down and they got smeared, they also got a little bit more subdued. And that's kind of the nature of what's happening here, right? We're smearing the paper, the white is shining through, and we're getting a more of a pastel or kind of a frosted look. But now I can come back in and I can leave solid blobs of color where I want them to be. I'll put a couple more in here, and we'll just use some other colors. And by the way, be careful not to inadvertently, rest your hand or arm in colors you've already put down. That doesn't end well. And ask me how I know that. All right, let me put another one right here. All right. And I'm going to put another one down here just to get some consistency. Nice, nice, okay. So again, I'm starting to see my eyes being drawn to these different pops of color, which is kind of fun as well. I'm going to do the same thing. I've got this bright yellow, and boy, if there's anything that's going to grab your eye, it's going to be bright yellow. So let me do something very similar, and I'm going to do just a little bit of distribution of paint in the yellow hue. Put something right here. Again, I love working with complementary colors like yellow and purple, because they do pop so well when they're next to each other. And we get something up here as well. Again, this is all about finding a way, look at what you're working on and let the colors and the patterns and just what the project is guide you. And it will. We'll talk to you and say, hey, I think you need a dot of yellow over here. All right. By the way, I'm in a situation where I got a little bit of a little smear coming down. Not a problem generally, but if you're trying to make perfect drops happen, you want to keep an eye on that. Make sure that it doesn't start dripping down the side of what you're working on. Go, and what else is a good place? I think we haven't done anything over here, so we'll do that. Nice. And let me put something right in down to the bottom here. That blue blob. There we go. All right. So again, and I don't want to overwork this. I don't want to overwork this, but I do want to be able to bring some colors. I'm going to bring in a color we actually haven't used yet here. We'll see how this works. This is an olive green. So this is going to be kind of a new introduction of color, but hopefully as a result of it not being there, it's not going to blend in. It's going to stand out, which is kind of what we're trying to do right now. So I don't have to put too many in here, but there's one. And we have that with the red, since they're complementary. Put something over here too. And I think that looks okay. It's fairly neutral, but not offensive. And put another one down here. And I think another one right up here. Drop it on that yellow. There we go. Yeah, I like that. What else should we put in here? You know what? Let's get some of a darker blue. We did the peacock blue. That's actually in here. Actually, you know what might work here? Oh, I do have a color that might be interesting. Again, sometimes you don't know, and there's that caution of, do I try this right here? Do I do it someplace else? But I have some silver. All right. I'm going to just put a drop or two. Again, it won't harm anything most likely if I'm just using a drop or two. But let's see if it makes a difference, if it does anything interesting. And if it doesn't, it's pretty neutral in truth. Let me put one here. I mean, it really just comes across as a gray color, so it's not like it's going to cause any major issues. Most people may never even notice it's a silver color. Looks like they got a bubble in it. And we'll put one right here too. All right. It's not bad. It's fairly neutral. And again, what we end up doing with this is up to us. I'm going to enhance a little bit. I think I'm going to grab some more pink here. And let's get the pink. Since it is such a bright color, it's going to pop out even though we have a fair amount of pink in the piece already. Let's just get this. Oops, looks like I'm dripping down the side again. Sometimes it's going to find the path of least resistance. There we go, some pink. And the pink goes really good with this blue. Let me get a blob of pink here to kind of... It's like, I want to go down the side. No, I don't want you to, though. Please, 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 please. Stay away from the side. And on that blue, yeah, look at that here. And I think we have room for one right up here. And we'll put something down here. All right. Now, I may take time. I may take time between colors, let this dry, see kind of what's happening. And again, maybe what this needs is some dots of black. I don't know. Put some brown in there. But you'll find that balance. But what we're really trying to do at the end of the day is to create something that is visually interesting to look at. That's really what we're trying to do as artists, right? We want to create something. Now, you may have some sort of statement you want to make, and I'm not saying you can't. Sometimes I find art is just about creating color and shape combinations that make your brain go, ooh, I like that, for whatever reason. So the way this has turned out, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it. I think there are some things I could do differently. And again, a lot of times when I create artwork, it's really going into an art lab. Because I'll say, I have a thought. What happens if I do this? And sometimes the answer is a pleasant surprise, and sometimes it's a learning experience. And I actually have a drawer in my flat file that is labeled stuff to be burned at some day in the future, right? And there are times when, we have a piece of artwork, and when we're done with it, we say, well, this is interesting, but is it what I really wanted to create? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is, well, I think this is interesting, and I learned an awful lot doing it. What could I do if I were to redo this project in the future to make it even better? And so we'll need to do that. So I'm kind of feeling that way about this. I think there's some really cool things about it, to be totally honest. I'm not sure this is ready for prime time the way I've constructed it. And I've already have some ideas, if I were to do this project again, how I might enhance it and make it even more interesting, how I'd create the color blends and combinations and all that. So, but again, what you come up with, I hope you're able to follow along and do something like this. you're going to find your results are obviously going to be different from mine. And you may just have that moment where your brain goes, oh, that's the one. It's perfect. It's exactly what I want. And again, a good splotch of color goes well pretty much in any room in your home, and have fun with it. And again, maybe you want to do something like, all different shades of green or something like that to really create something thematic. The big takeaway for this project is learning how to mask your paper so you don't smear paint where you didn't want to smear paint, and also how to smear paint in a way that's interesting. Now, by the way, we can come in here instead of this vertical, maybe we do a horizontal next, right? We do a vertical layer, let it dry, do some horizontal, let it dry, see what we come up with. Anyway, I want you to be able to find your own path, which is what the 1 hour masterpiece is all about. Come on in, try something you've never tried before, take a chance. When you're done, you may be out a piece of paper, you may be out a little bit of paint and some tape, really. It's not a big expenditure, and hopefully you can have a lot of fun doing it, experimenting, and if all goes according to plan, you might have something you say, wow, that's really awesome. I made that, and that's going up on the wall. That's what's going to happen with that. Anyway, that's all I really have for you today. If you've enjoyed the time you spent with us today here at Mixed Media Masters, we'd love to see you on a regular basis. Please hit the subscribe button. We'll let you know whenever new videos drop. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll see you next time.